On December 26, 1985, a man in upstate New York experienced something so bizarre it would change his life forever. An encounter with a group of non-human beings. In 1987, he published a book about his experience. Titled Communion, the book became a huge success, reaching #1 on the New York Times bestsellers list. Whitley's book didn't just join in on the conversation about aliens and the paranormal. It talked about things that hadn't been openly discussed before. See, prior to the late 1980s, UFO and alien talk primarily centered around sightings and crash saucers. But Communion shifted the conversation. It went from, is there something out there, to, is there something happening to us? I'm Brooke, and this is a story of Whitley Strieber, a man who claims to have encounters with non-human visitors. It's late December of 1985, and Whitley, his wife Ann, and their son had been spending the Christmas holiday in their cabin in upstate New York. December 26 had started off just like any other day. After eating breakfast, he and his son went sledding, then went cross-country skiing in the afternoon. That evening, after eating dinner and putting their son to bed, he and Ann relaxed, listening to music and reading. Whitley said that around 8:30 he turned on the home security alarm, which monitored all the windows and doors. Then he made his way around the cabin, checking each room, the closets, and even looking under the beds, something he said he started doing the previous fall. By 10 p.m., he and Ann were in bed, and by 11 they were sleeping. At some point during the night, Whitley was woken by a strange noise. It was coming from downstairs. He said it sounded as if people were moving quickly around the living room. Startled, Whitley sat up and looked at the alarm panel next to the bed. It was on and alarmed. And according to the system, no windows or doors had been opened. Just as Whitley was about to lay back down again, something caught his eye. One of the double doors in their bedroom was slowly closing. An unsettling feeling permeated the room. And when Whitley saw what had been moving it, he was stunned. Staring at him from the doorway of the room was a figure that stood roughly 3.5 feet tall. It had 2 large eyes and a black slit for a mouth. On its head was a smooth, rounded hat with a large brim. The being wore a square plate that was etched with concentric circles that went from just below the chin to its waist. Whitley said it looked like some kind of armor. On its lower half was some sort of rectangular device that came to just above its knees. Despite being fully awake, Whitley was so shocked by what he was seeing that he just sat there, unable to move. Was he hallucinating? Perhaps it was an illusion. He wasn't sure what to believe. That's when the figure came rushing into the room and Whitley blacked out. When he came to, he was naked, with his arms and legs extended out. Whitley realized he was being moved, but he wasn't sure how, as his body was completely paralyzed. He couldn't feel anything touching him. He couldn't even feel the December cold. Whitley blacked out again, and this time when he came to, he was in the woods. And he wasn't alone. Whitley said that to his left, a small female figure was sitting on the ground wearing a tannish gray bodysuit. And just like the being he had seen in his room, this one too had large eyes and a round mouth hole. Another figure stood to his right. This one wore dark blue coveralls and was working on something on the side of Whitley's head. The next thing he knew, he was floating up past the treetops. And when he looked down, he said the forest was slowly spinning beneath him. A moment later, a gray panel slid closed under his feet. That's when Whitley's confusion turned to fear and dread. He said it was so intense and primal that to him, it felt like Whitley had died, and in his place was a wild animal. Whitley was placed in a small tan-gray round room while small figures worked quickly around him. Despite trying to take in everything that was happening, Whitley couldn't focus his vision. Instead, everything remained blurred. He wondered if the beings had done something to his eyes to prevent him from seeing things. A figure approached Whitley, holding out a small gray box with a sliding lid. Inside was what appeared to be a thin needle. They communicated to Whitley that they intended to insert it into his brain. That's when Whitley began screaming. One of the figures asked him what they could do to help him calm down, and Whitley's response shocked even himself. He said he remembered feeling embarrassed and bothered by his own request, to smell one of them. They obliged. He said he could smell the faint scent of cardboard, a slight sour organic smell, and a hint of cinnamon. By the time he had taken in the scent, the procedure was complete and he was taken to another room. This one looked more like an operating theater with a table in the center and 3 tiers of benches for observers. If anything was done to him in the OR, he had no memory of it. Whitley said that by this point he had seen 4 different types of beings. The first were the small robot-like figures that appeared in his bedroom. Then there were the short, stocky ones wearing blue coveralls. Next were the slender ones that were roughly 5 foot tall with black slanted eyes. He also saw slender beings that had large round eyes. After, fecal samples were taken from him, and then one of the figures grabbed his right hand and made an incision on his finger. Whitley couldn't recall anything after that. He awoke the following morning, feeling uneasy and unable to shake an intense memory of an owl staring at him through his window all night. Whitley knew it didn't make sense, yet it was all he could picture. Anne immediately noticed a drastic change in her husband's personality, while Whitley noticed that he was completely drained of his energy and felt like he was coming down with the flu. Over the following days, Whitley no longer felt like himself. In fact, he felt a separation that was hard to explain. He found it difficult to concentrate and had random aches in his body. His finger became infected and he had unexplainable rectal pain. He couldn't shake the feeling that something traumatic had happened to him. Then, on January 3rd, the memories came rushing back. Whitley had been feeling all kinds of random pain in his body, an infected finger, rectal pain, and finally intense pain behind his right ear. That's when a series of memories swarmed him, and what he remembered left him utterly terrified. Was he losing his mind? Perhaps he had a brain tumor. It wasn't until he saw an article about strange objects in the sky published in his local newspaper that he knew he wasn't alone in what he had experienced. Whitley began researching the phenomenon and came across a name, Bud Hopkins, a researcher in the field of ufology. In February, the two met. That's when Whitley began to remember other encounters he'd had. One occurred 2 months prior, in October of 1985. Again, he, his wife Anne, and their son had been at their cabin along with another couple. After eating dinner at a nearby restaurant, the group went to the cabin and almost immediately went to bed. Sometime in the middle of the night, Whitley awoke to a strange blue light being cast on the ceiling. It was so bright he couldn't understand where it was coming from. Whitley drifted off back to sleep and awoke again. This time, the entire house was surrounded by a glow. For a moment, he believed that the house was on fire. Just as he was about to get everyone out of the house, the strange glow suddenly disappeared. Now, when Whitley asked his wife about her recollection of that night, she remembered hearing a loud, unexplainable bang. Then he asked his son, and nothing could have prepared him for what he heard next. Andrew told his dad about a strange dream he'd had. One where a bunch of small doctors had taken him out to the porch and laid him on a cot, all while reassuring him that they wouldn't hurt him. Whitley was stunned. Andrew's dream felt all too familiar to what he had experienced. He also spoke to the couple who had been at the cabin with them. Jacques told Whitley he remembered waking up to a room full of light. At first, he thought he overslept. Then he looked at his watch. It was only 4:30. Then he heard Whitley through the door saying, "It's okay, the light is gone." After that, Jacques went back to sleep. Whitley was so rattled by the events that occurred in October and December, and what appeared to be memory loss, that he sought out therapy. But he didn't want just any therapist. He wanted his therapist to have an open mind, but not have any specific beliefs about aliens. He also wanted someone who was trained in hypnotherapy. As Whitley put it, he wanted both scientific rigor and therapeutic skill. He was also adamant about not working with anyone tied to Bud Hopkins or the UFO community. He eventually found Dr. Donald Klein from the New York State Psychiatric Institute. A few weeks later, they were talking about doing a hypnosis session, but they needed to tread lightly. Studies suggested that anybody under hypnosis could be induced to remember a UFO abduction experience, complete with details and all if they were asked leading questions specifically about abductions. Proceeding with caution, Whitley underwent 2 hypnotic sessions, with the first taking place March 1st of 1986. In this session, Dr. Klein took Whitley back to the night of October 4th, 1985. While under hypnosis, Whitley described a being in his room that showed him images of an apocalyptic world. Here's an excerpt of the transcript. I saw something that looked like it had a hood on it, standing over by the wall near the corner in our bedroom. And I don't want it to be there. I don't want it to be there. Please, God, what's it doing to me? Stop. Oh, stop. What's it doing to me? You know it's dark. It's like a little man with a hood on or something. It looks almost like this, there's no head. He's covered in something. And comes over to the bed and he starts sticking something into my head. You understand? But it was sticking it into my mind. When he sees I see him, he comes over to the bed. He looks mean. He's little. Goes up to about the top of the lamp, looking down at me. Got eyes, big eyes, big slanted eyes. A bald head. He's looking down at me. He's got a ruler in his hand. Has a tip of silver. Touches me. I see pictures. I see pictures of the world just blowing up. I see pictures of the whole place just blowing up when he touches my head with this thing. Jesus, it's a picture of a whole big blast, and there's a dark red fire in the middle of it, and there's white smoke all around it. Then Dr. Klein asked Whitley about other images the being had shown him. Whitley went on to describe images of his own father's death, but here's the thing. Whitley didn't think that they reflected what really happened. He wondered if they were fears of what might have happened to his father, but he couldn't be sure as he wasn't physically present for his father's passing. He could only go by what his mother had told him. It led him to wonder if the being was showing him images of his biggest fears, or if these were events that had occurred or would occur in the future. 4 days later, on March 5th, Whitley had his second hypnosis session with Dr. Klein. This time they focused on the events surrounding December 26, 1985, when Whitley was taken to their spacecraft. We go to sleep in bed. I have a real good book to read. Give Anne a kiss. Can hear the snow on the house, a little bit of snow. Turn out the light. I go to sleep. Did I turn on the burglar alarm? I listen to the radio for a while. They have on our front porch jazz. It's late. Turn it off and the whole place fills with quiet. Now I'm getting sleepy. Go to sleep. Definitely think I hear him. I hear them. Comes right in the door. Looks like he's wearing cards. God damn, I really see this. He looks like he's wearing cards. On his chest, this big square blue card on his chest. An oblong one down his middle. And he has on a round hat. And he's wearing a face mask with 2 eye holes and a round hole between them toward the bottom. And he's moving real fast, and he stands beside my bed and makes a gesture to the door. And there's a hell of a lot of them filing into the room. I'm talking about a lot of them. They're not wearing the cards. They're wearing overalls, coveralls, blue. I can see their heads, which are bald. Time to get up. I get up. I'm scared, you see. I'm scared as hell. I take off my pajamas. Scared to see Anne. I have to say goodbye to her now. There's 2 whole rows of them. I'm going out. They're moving me. They're moving me. They're moving me. Are they moving me from hand to hand? They're little bitty people. I feel like I could almost pick one of them up with one hand. I don't like the look of that thing. That's a cot or like a bed, only it's for me. I feel sick inside. I'm just sick. I'm not. I'm just sort of watching all of this. I don't know where they are now. I lay down on the cot. It just gets sort of jumbled. I remember I thought it was almost like getting into the electric chair, and it goes off on the back of the porch, and I know this is a dream because I'm flying. I'm flying, so this must be a dream. No, they're carrying me. At least they're around me. You see, what's so funny is I'm lying down and I can see the sky. I can see the clouds, and they're all around me, though, and I'm naked and I'm not cold, and I can see the sky. This thing has there's 2 places for my arms, and it's not like a bed. It's got places for my feet, and it's got a place for my head. I'm lying on it, and I'm looking up at the sky, and I can see things like clouds. And there's like a swarm of them. They're around me, and I have a feeling, I don't feel very much. I feel very numb and funny. Not bad, it's kind of nice. It's a feeling like you're just sort of numb. And the next thing I know, I'm sitting. I'm still in this thing, but I'm sitting in the woods. It's almost as if it became a part of me, it keeps me in it, but if I move around, it stays with me. And I'm not going anywhere, that's for sure, because this thing just stays with me. We're sitting in a hole, like a little hole. I remember someone sitting right over there, but now I don't remember it, or they're not there anymore. These people are scaring me terribly because woof, right up, just shot right up. Yeah, that scared the dickens out of me. I saw the trees down there. I went way up, right up, must have gone up 100 feet, more than 100 feet, up past the trees, just like that, whoop, right up out of the woods. It was like going up in an elevator, really felt it. I felt it, right up. And now they've got a floor under me. I know this is no dream. I sure hope I get home again. I'm glad they took that thing away. I'm sitting on a bench in a little room, and it smells funny. Smells something like cheese in here. Smells kind of nasty, to tell you the truth. It's not clean in here. Here's something. Somebody talking to me. There's somebody talking to me. Now she walks right past me in the front, and she's wearing a tan suit. She looks like a little person made out of leather, sort of. I see the head real clearly, and you got, it's like, makes you sick, kind of, because, I don't know where this thing could be going. She's looking at me. She's looking real close. She's got a matchbox. No, it's not a matchbox. Oh, what is it? What do you mean an operation? What do you mean an operation? I'm getting real scared again, real scared, because I can't do a thing about this. I don't even want to look up at this. Can we help you stop screaming? Can we help you stop screaming? You could let me smell you. She puts her cheek up on my face. They are here. You have to understand that. They are here. I'm not going to let you do an operation. We won't hurt you. I'm not going to let you do an operation on me. You have absolutely no right. We do have a right. That was it. Bang. There was nothing to it. I thought they were going to cut my whole head open. There was nothing to it. Whitley goes on to describe how an object was inserted into his rectum, possibly to take samples from him. They also attempted to take semen from him, but were unable to. Then, Whitley recalled seeing the beings before, when he was 12. Whitley's life had completely turned itself upside down. As he attempted to make sense of the incomprehensible, a number of theories flooded his mind. Perhaps he truly was going insane. As he put it, how could someone not be psychotic and yet have these spectacular delusions? But what if these beings were real? What if they've been here all along, hiding themselves in our folklore? He also hypothesized that they could be from another dimension or time. Could they be human time travelers in disguise? Our ancestors not wanting to create chaos and confusion. Then he began to consider what they looked like. Their appearance seemed somewhat insect-like with their enormous black eyes and their stiff movement. What if they were hive insects that had gained superior intelligence and were operating under an enormous mind? Whatever this was, no matter how terrifying, Whitley decided that he was going to see this through. After consulting with his family physician, Whitley said his doctor confirmed the presence of physical injuries like rectal damage, and helped arrange for psychological testing, which discovered only a high stress level, and neurological testing, which ruled out any seizure disorders that might cause hallucinations. Whitley said, "At first, I thought I was losing my mind, but I was interviewed by 3 psychologists and 3 psychiatrists, given a battery of psychological tests and a neurological examination, and found to fall within the normal range in all aspects. I was also given a polygraph by an operator with 30 years experience, and I passed without qualification." In April of 1986, he began researching the phenomenon. The late 1940s saw a surge of UFO reports, followed by the June 25, 1947 sighting of 9 unidentified flying discs by pilot Kenneth Arnold. Whitley theorized that the late 40s seemed to be the time that these beings first began coming here, or at the very least, seemed to start making their presence known. And it appeared that people began being taken by them not long after, though the first abduction reports weren't widely publicized until the 60s. Whitley noticed a pattern. The craft were first seen from a distance in the 40s and 50s. Then they began to be observed at closer and closer range. By the early 60s, there were reports of entities and a few abduction cases. Then in the mid-80s, people, who for the most part were all independent of one another, began to discover the being's presence in their lives. For Whitley, the next logical step was to revisit his childhood. And while he had no current recollection of anything to do with extraterrestrials back then, a childhood friend of his remembered 13-year-old Whitley telling him that the spacemen taught him how to build an anti-gravity machine. He also remembered being taken off a train during a family trip when he was 12. Whitley said he came down with a fever on their way home. He awoke to find himself in a room where a number of GIs, in full uniform, were lying on tables and were being touched by a tall, thin, black-eyed being holding a copper rod. The next event Dr. Klein and Whitley revisited happened in the fall of 1984, as Whitley was driving home from the grocery store. He had been driving down a dirt road when suddenly 2 figures in dark blue uniforms were leaning in through his car window. The next memory he was back on the highway heading home. For years, Whitley dismissed it as nothing more than a dream. But now, with more and more reports coming out about people having been abducted while driving, it seemed worthwhile to revisit in a hypnosis session. Dr. Klein took Whitley back to that fall afternoon. Whitley remembered driving his car and seeing something above it. It made him feel uneasy. He remembered a white pickup truck passing him, but something seemed off about it. The next thing Whitley remembered, he was in a long gray room with a number of beings in it. However, one figure stood out amongst the rest, a female who was much taller than the others. It was then that Whitley realized he had seen her many times before. Through working with Dr. Klein, Whitley discovered that he had had at least a dozen encounters with these strange beings over the years. He also discovered that there seemed to be 2 types of interactions with them: shorter visits that involved a single individual or small group, and longer visits that took place on their spacecraft. Shorter visits seemed to center around psychological tests, while the longer ones were focused on the physical. Through his sessions with Dr. Klein, he also discovered that each encounter stayed a single isolated event, meaning he was never able to reference past encounters. This made learning from them incredibly difficult, as each hypnosis session was terrifying and shocking as if he was seeing the beings for the first time, every time. In March of 1986, after one of his sessions, he noticed a shift. A vivid and detailed image of the female visitor began to appear in his mind. Whitley said it was so real it was almost as if he could touch it. His attempt at explaining what he was seeing to Bud Hopkins and Dr. Klein failed. They had never heard of such a thing happening. Was this an effect of the hypnosis sessions, or had Whitley somehow attracted the being's attention? After all, the image of the being seemed to take on a life of its own. It wasn't simply a static picture or vivid memory. Whitley could actually feel a connection to it, and he could make it move on command. Whitley needed answers. It was time to bring his wife, Anne, into the fold. If something was really happening, she had to know, right? On March 13, 1986, Anne was hypnotized by Dr. Robert Naiman. And while Anne couldn't give too many details, she recalled being aware of a lot of activity in their cabin on October 4th and December 26th, 2 of the nights Whitley had encounters. She described it as a party that she wasn't invited to, saying, "They came for Whitley and he's supposed to go, but I'm not supposed to go." When pressed about who they were, Anne said, "Nobody that I know of." But she did reference listening to an order much like a child would listen to their mom. Whitley had the impression that her memories were blocked, but wondered if the mom reference could actually be the female he kept seeing. Anne had even stated at one point that she remembered seeing owls. Anne also had a memory of being poked in the stomach with a device. Oddly enough, at the same time, their son was also awoken from a nightmare about something poking him in the stomach. Anne described seeing a little white ghost with little feet, and she alluded to seeing it more than once. During another hypnosis session on March 17th, they discuss Anne's prior statement about Whitley leaving in the middle of the night. Here's the transcript. "What do you mean Whitley's supposed to go?" "Well, that's what I said." Whitley then asks, "Do you see me go?" To which Anne replies, "No, but I hear it. There's a lot of noise sometimes. I keep my eyes closed." "But don't you worry?" "No, you're always there in the morning." For Whitley, this was huge. In his eyes, her testimony supported the notion that something really was happening, and not only to him, but also his wife and son. And visitors were indeed coming into their home at night. But what could all this mean? Whitley speculated that the visitors could be from another planet, or they could be from Earth. He also pondered the concept of them being from our dimension but a different time, believing that time travel could be possible if we could convert a human being into some sort of energetic medium, say light or radio waves. Then place a reconverter 100,000 light years from Earth. A person could step through a door here and feel as if they had come out the other side instantaneously, then step back and find that they were 200,000 years in the future. He also wondered if experiencers were dealing with some kind of natural hallucination, say from magnetism or low frequencies, that it was causing people to have similar experiences. He also believed that visitors could just be an aspect of the human species, almost like how a caterpillar turns into a butterfly. What if when we die, we go into our next form? Whitley spent months researching the phenomena. Along the way, he discovered that the government seemed to know more about the situation than they were letting on. He came across a letter written by Dr. Robert Sarbacher, a physicist and consultant with the U.S. Department of Defense Research and Development Board. The letter was dated November 29, 1983, and was addressed to a William Steinman, a UFO researcher who had inquired about Sarbacher's government consulting activities during the late 1940s. In it, Sarbacher says, there were reports that instruments or people operating these machines were also of very light weight, sufficient to withstand the tremendous deceleration and acceleration associated with their machinery. I remember in talking with some of the people at the office that I got the impression these aliens were constructed like certain insects we have observed on Earth, wherein because of the low mass, the inertial forces involved in operating these instruments would be quite low. I still do not know why the higher order of classification has been given, and why the denial of the existence of these devices. The second piece of evidence that Whitley pointed to was how the government handled an event in July of 1947, where a rancher near Roswell, New Mexico found strange debris, initially leading the military to announce the recovery of a flying saucer. Here's that initial press release. The many rumors regarding the flying disc became a reality yesterday when the intelligence office of the 9th Bomb Group of the 8th Air Force Roswell Army Airfield was fortunate enough to gain possession of a disc through the cooperation of one of the local ranchers in the sheriff's office of Chavez County. The flying object landed on a ranch near Roswell sometime last week. Not having phone facilities, the rancher stored the disc until such time as he was able to contact the sheriff's office, who in turn notified Major Jesse A. Marcel of the 509th Bomber Group Intelligence Office. Action was immediately taken and the disc was picked up at the rancher's home. It was inspected at the Roswell Army Airfield and subsequently loaned by Major Marcel to higher headquarters. Later, however, the military retracted their initial statement, saying the recovered object was a weather balloon. Take the military out of it, and stories about airships date back hundreds of years. On April 26, 1897, in Merkel, Texas, a group of people heading home from church one evening claimed to have seen a heavy object dragging along the ground. They followed it until it got caught on a railroad track. It was an anchor of some sort, and tied to it was a rope. When they looked up, they saw an airship with lighted windows and a headlight on the front that was brighter than a train. The group sat staring at it. 10 minutes later, a man was seen coming down the rope. He was small and wearing what the group described as a blue sailor suit. When he saw the group, he cut the rope and the ship sailed off into the night sky, leaving the anchor behind. Now, this story was particularly interesting to Whitley because of the description of what the being wore, a blue sailor suit. Remember, the first beings that Whitley saw wore blue coveralls. And listen to this visitor account from 1211. Parishioners at St. Canarius Church in Ireland heard a noise on the roof. When they went outside to investigate, they saw an anchor on the eaves. Attached to the anchor line was a floating ship. They described what looked like a man aboard the ship. The group watched as he leapt overboard and swam down the anchor. After an altercation with the parishioners, he cut the rope, returned to the ship, and sailed away. Now, the anchor was said to have remained in the church, but was lost over the years. In April of 1986, Whitley began meeting with other abductees around the New York area. Initially, Whitley was expecting to encounter people who were just seeking publicity. He couldn't have been more wrong. The group he met with were average people from all walks of life: a cosmetologist, a scientist, a housewife, a business executive, a museum curator. They ranged in age from 22 to 56, and most of them wanted to remain anonymous. Whitley found that his experience with the visitors had many similarities to those in the support group. For example, they had almost all seen versions of the same creatures, been in some type of operating theater, and had seen triangle symbols. Whitley also discovered that a number of them had had encounters starting as young as 5. He also learned that many of their children were also involved. A number of them had reported feeling like they were being continuously monitored and watched at all times. Some noticed that the beings seemed to function almost as if under military discipline. They moved in unison and had orders to carry out. After publishing Communion, Whitley began receiving letters from people detailing their own experiences with visitors and being abducted. He claimed that he and Anne received more than 140,000 reports. Over the next 5 years, that number climbed to nearly 500,000. In 1997, they published a collection of reader experiences called the Communion Letters. Whitley said he had continued contact with the visitors until the mid-90s. Then, around 1995, their visits began to become fewer and fewer. It wasn't until his wife Anne passed in 2015 that the visits picked up again. To this day, Whitley says he experiences continued contact with them. Over the years, his perception about who they are and what they want have changed. Initially, he viewed his encounters with them as traumatic and terrifying, but eventually he began to see them as benevolent. In his 1988 follow-up book titled Transformation, he says, "I do not think we are dealing with something as straightforward as the arrival of a scientific team from another planet that is here to study us. Neither are we dealing with hallucinations." He would later go on to describe his encounters with them as safe but challenging. In a 2024 interview with Pop Apocalypse, he says, "We have to accept the fact that we don't know what this is. We have bodies, we have devices, we have materials, but we still don't know what this is. This is a big old universe, and just the part of it we can measure contains 2 trillion stars, and God only knows how many planets." Now, we can't talk about Whitley and Communion without mentioning the obvious. Back in 1987, he was a known horror sci-fi author with successful books like The Wolfen, published in 1978, and The Hunger, published in 1981. Critics naturally point to Communion being entirely made up, but here's the thing. Communion wasn't a sci-fi novel. He positioned it as a personal testimony. There are also those who are skeptical about Whitley's claims that he didn't believe in UFOs prior to 1985. In his book, he said, "I did not believe in UFOs at all before this happened, and I would have laughed in the face of anybody who claimed contact. Period. I am not a candidate for conversion to any new religion that involves belief in benevolent space brothers or in unidentified flying objects as the craft of intergalactic saints or sinners." However, for Christmas that year, Whitley's brother Richard had gifted him the book Science and the UFOs. Now, Whitley said at the time he had no interest in the subject and dismissed the book as nonsense. It was only after his experience and his brother's encouragement that he finally read it. Whitley also points to the implant he has in his left ear as further proof of his abduction narrative. He says that in 1989, a clearly human man and woman broke into his cabin and forcibly pinned him down in his bed, all while shoving his head down into his pillow, then abruptly leaving. The next day, he awoke with something embedded in his left ear, and the only sign that intruders had been in the cabin was an open garage door. A few years later, he tried to have the implant surgically removed, but was unsuccessful.
Go ahead and just make an incision around that. Just feel it again. But see, this will last.
But then it goes, I guess it went under.
But that's the hard part.
But it disappeared again.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
It's actually moving now.
Well, he's poking it, but it went under.
It's on the run.
Well, it kind of is, because I could see it just bright as day, and now it's, I don't see it. Yeah.
John's being a little persistent here. There is nothing there.
I mean, I got a little piece.
Here's some more on here.
That's it. I'm not gonna do any more. Okay, give me the.
Now, whether you believe in Whitley's story or not, one thing is certain. His story resonated with people all over the world. A fact made evident by the sheer number of letters that people sent him sharing their own personal experiences with aliens, abductions, and UFOs. Not only that, Whitley's book changed how people saw UFOs in general. Whitley's story was deeply personal and traumatic, and it was happening in his own bedroom. No longer were UFOs simply thought of as strange lights in the sky. Whitley's account added in the human experience. Now, I pass the question off to you. Had you heard about Whitley Strieber and his book before today's video? Do you believe him and what he experienced? I don't know, as fantastical as his accounts get, there's still something sincere, genuine, and believable about what he's saying. In fact, he still does interviews and podcasts to this day, so I highly recommend checking them out if you're interested in learning more about his story. I think they're fascinating, and he does a great interview. If you enjoyed today's video, give it a thumbs up, and hey, while you're at it, consider subscribing to the channel so you don't miss out on the next investigation.